David with Shur-Loc Fabrics, and today we're going to be looking at the roller frame endurance panel. So the roller frame endurance panel has glue around the perimeter, as you can see here. It's a different style connector. If you've ever seen our original Shur-Loc panels with the plastic strips around the perimeter, this is a little bit different setup. So we've actually created a loop with the mesh, and that's how you're going to insert it and install it onto the frame. The great thing about the adhesive that's around the perimeter is you can see that it kind of acts as a blockout, something that you can put your emulsion up to the edges on, and it's also an awesome bulletproof protection along the perimeter. That's where it's going to take the beading along the edge of the roller, and this glue is going to, it's basically like a ripstop. It's going to really prevent things from penetrating through the edge of the mesh. So we've got our stamps that are built into the edges. That's locked in there. And we've got a roll number on one side. We still have our color coding. Some people that have never seen these before would wonder, why is there a blue on there? It's because it's a 160 mesh, and that's what we used to label all of our plastic with, and people got really used to that with our original Shur-Loc panels. This glue is also very chemical resistant, so it's another key feature to these panels. So I'm going to grab a 23 by 31, really common auto size here. This one happens to be an M3. So we'll load this onto our Accelerator X tensioning table. So a great product that you can stretch up frames very quickly in your shop. So I will just set this on the inside here, stamp side up so I can read it. You can see right there. Just put that side up, set that in the middle. Then I've got my little connectors here. So I've got longs and shorts, and I've got the insertion piece, and then I've got the outer aluminum jacket piece there. So we'll just start with one. I'm gonna grab one of my nylon rods here. It's just an 1/8 inch diameter, it's really small, so we've minimized the amount of that the connector needs to use up on the edge, so we can bring the glue up closer to the edge to really maximize protection along here. So one of the important things that makes it really simple to be able to install the outer piece is by not going all the way to the end. So I've just come up a little bit short on the end when I slid in my 1/8 inch rod. Then I've got my aluminum piece here, and I'm simply just going to slide that outer aluminum piece right over the mesh, just like that. Very simple. And then with my other finger here, I've just pushed this over until I can see the white nylon rod come out the other end here. So what you're looking for is just a centered piece on the mesh. So just get those centered and balanced as much as possible. I'll flip this around. I will load this into the roller tube, center that up. And for you that have used the previous panels before, it loads in just on the top, just like the previous one. So it's very, very quick and easy to load in. Then I'm going to come around to my parallel side here and just pull straight across. I always like working with the long sides first because you're pulling the majority of the mesh. It's easiest to hook up and set up there. So remember, just leave a little bit of mesh on the end. It makes it a lot easier for getting this aluminum piece onto the panel itself. So if you turn it up vertically, I've found that works best to slide that on rather than having it more flat. It kind of puts more binding pressure on the mesh itself. So I've centered up my white piece here in the center, the rod, on the aluminum part, and then I'm just going to simply load that in on the top. So before we get too far here, I'm going to borrow this wrenching pin here and take it over to my other side here. The Accelerator X hardware has a little arrow right here. That's really critical to make sure that we're rotating everything uniformly. We cut out these shapes so that they're all balanced in all four corners. So when you stretch it up, you want to rotate those tubes as evenly as possible from one parallel side to the other parallel side. So I'm going to rotate this up, put the wrenching pin at the very highest point that I can put on there, so it's the minimal amount of rotation and pressure on the panel. So once I've got that set up, I've got the other pin down below to prevent the wrench from falling down prematurely. This one's loaded up. Anytime you work on one side and then you go to the other side, just make sure that everything is still centered, because as you're turning and rotating and moving, things can slide around until you get pressure and tension on it. So just take a quick peek, make sure everything's nice and centered, tighten up that wrench on there. Remember that arrow points down onto right where the mesh inserts there for consistency. And then this one I can just put maybe on hole number 2. You just want the wrench to stay put so that it won't come off there. All right, coming to my short ends here, I'm gonna slide in this 1/8 inch rod. Just come up a little short there, grab my aluminum connector, and there is a right and wrong way, a direction to go. You want the little lip going towards the outward edge. That little lip right there is the bull noose, and that kind of tilts in the outer trough. That's what, once you get tension on it, will prevent it from coming out. So slide that right down on the mesh. Balance and center as much as possible. Load that in. I'll insert my wrench. And again, just rotate it down to the most minimal point there. Come around to my other side. And load on my final short end. Slide these in. Now remember, what's cool about these connectors is these connectors are completely reusable. So you are just going to slide those out. You can put them in a dip tank, you can clean them up, do whatever needs to be done to those. And the aluminum and the nylon connectors on there can just be reused over and over again, so you're just replacing the mesh. So I will insert my last piece, my last wrench here. And I'm just going to rotate that down just to get a little bit of pressure. I'll go to hook number 2 on that just so it's pulling it nice and taut. So always go back to your long side when you begin the tensioning process. That pulls the majority of the mesh. So it doesn't matter which side. I'll begin to bring this down. Now this setup here for the endurance panel itself, we actually kind of go against what we used to do. We used to make the panels really as small as possible to have the minimal amount of rotation. These ones, we want a little bit of rotation on the tube so that you can actually get this protective adhesive out where it works the best along the edge of the roller tube. So in some cases, you may have to just take this wrench, flip it over, and load this on just like so. Now, doing that right off the bat probably isn't realistic until you get the entire panel loaded onto the frame itself. So I don't need the lower wrenching pin there. I will just swap this over. And this is where you're going to start to get a little bit more pressure going. So if you're going to make the swap and switch this over, which you'll likely need to in order to get the amount of tension that you want to get on this fabric, you just want to rotate those wrenches right over. So once you've got that done to the last side there, everything looks good. Just do a visual too as you stretch to make sure that nothing slid and moved and everything's nice and centered the way you want it to. So I'll come back to my long side. So everything is looking pretty good. I've already got a fair amount of tension here. I went down to hook 3. The front holes are half movements, the back ones are full movements. So I'm really at about a 2.5 there. So I'm starting to get some tension on here. Take my tension meter. I've got a Shur-Loc 130 tension meter here. Let's see what we've got. So we're right at about 30. This is a 160 mesh. Probably want to take this up high 30s or so, maybe even 40 newtons. So I'm going to rotate this around. I know that I'm at the 3rd hole down in the front. Sometimes it's just easier to count the holes down, but we've got a decal there that labels those holes as well for easy reference. So we'll rotate this around. Right now I'm just going to match all the numbering sequence on the holes until I get to a point where I'm really close on tension. Then I can start to fine tune it and dial it in. I want to just show you where we're at there for reference, and then I'll take a quick peek. So we're 35, we're 34 the long way and 35 the short way. So we'll go a little bit more. Let's go one more hole all the way around, get this thing up, get some tension going here. So I'm in the 4th hole down on the front. Do that here as well. As you can see, these corners are cut out nice for all those direct-to-screen units and stuff with sensors that can trip. So you've got a nice tight corner, the minimal amount of mesh that you'd have to have on there. Believe that we're at hook 4 on everything in the beginning stages here. So let's take a look and see where we're at. So we're at 38. 37 the long way. So if I want to even that up just a little bit, we're 37 from short tube to short tube. So the best way to do that is just to take this and go one more notch here, stick in that pin, and then just check it again. So we're 38 and just over 38 right there. So we're extremely close on that. I like it. It looks good. At that point, this is where you really have to take into consideration, and we'll increase tension here. We'll see what we end up with when we tension up these. But if you do have these black bolts on your frames, it can increase tension a fair amount. So I like it. Everything looks good. It's as balanced as possible. This one I did on the short, I moved, and then I didn't move this one. Once you get really close, if you just need to move down one pin and get a little bit more rotation, you're still going to have beautiful fabric lines in the center of your print area that you really care about. So try to keep it as balanced as much as possible until you get to those final tension points. So I'm going to take my torque wrench. Torque wrench, really important so that you're getting everything uniform and consistent all the way around on the frame. So I'm going to rotate this down so I'm tightening. And it's really, really important to start with a downward stroke first. This, we believe, that helps ensure that you're going to keep the frame most flat as possible to help prevent racking. Having an accelerator turntable set up like this with the hardware and everything, and having it up off the deck with these elevation pads is also one of the key features of this to help ensure that you're going to have a nice flat frame when you're finished up here. So I've done the downward stroke bolt first. I'm going to about 50 foot-pounds of torque. Just match it up with whatever the frame manufacturer recommends on the torque settings for these bolts. Then instead of coming down, most people want to come from their hip down here and pull up. That's a really bad way to or I guess it's a good way to ensure the fact that you're going to probably create some racking, and that's what you don't want to do. So encourage your guys to put the wrench handle up towards the ceiling, and then when they push down and they torque on these, push towards the tube instead of pulling up from the bottom. So you hear that click? That tells me that I'm at the torque setting that I want to be at. I'm going to go down just like that, torque that one up. And when I come to my short end, that final click, you want to make sure that you're upward just like that. Getting a nice amount of torque on there. And these black bolt tubes, they have a little angle on the corner, and that's what pulls out some of the deflection. We've compensated for the deflection and the pre-softening in the corners of these so that it's as uniform as possible on there. So no matter which style of frame you have, it'll be the right setup for you. All right. I'm coming around to my last side here. I've just got this last short tube to go. Once we're all set, then we can begin to take off the wrenches here so we can see it from start to finish. Slide the wrenching panel right back in the spot. I'm going to go end to end here since we've got a lot of torque and pressure on this. Just put a little bit of down pressure so you can get that pin out easily. We basically repeat that process of just loading these back on if you want to retension this. Sometimes you push down too hard and it just pops up on you. But that's what happens when we're all finished up and we've got our last one off. So we've got a beautifully stretched frame. We've got the endurance. You can see that the protection is going out along the perimeter of the edges here. So this is the side that when you slide it into your press and your racks, this area right here is the point that it's going to get dinged up and scratched up and punched holes in the edges. So it's nice and balanced, stretched up nice. We've got good tension. Let's check one more final tension reading here before we finish this up to see how we changed. See what we got there. You guys got to see first. So we're about 40. So 40 the long way and just over 40. So we increased about 2 newtons or so, 2 or 3 newtons on the increase. Some lower mesh counts can increase more than that. So you just want to be careful with those, but there will be a little bit of increase. So thanks so much for watching. You can check out more videos and products at Shur-Loc.com.